Stargirl.
You guys, I've got to get my notes. I'm stressed. I'm stressed. I'm
Oh,
stressed.
why?
What
Why are
did
you
Cindy do
stressed?
this week?
Oh, when do
Oh
you hear
no.
this? When do
What's
you hear
Cindy
this?
up to?
When do you hear this mess? So I have to say, without question, this has been the most tense episode of the season so far. Not surprising. I said episode 6 is always a huge episode. This was a huge episode. We had that great fight scene, but it built towards it. And my goodness, did it make you wait for it? Um, so yes, last week, Yolanda found the laptop under Cindy's bed. And then she brought it to the JSA, and it was like, I was right all along. And the rest of the JSA, bar Courtney, all deduced, like, well, she obviously killed the gambler because she has his laptop. So, like, she's been lying to us all along. So, we need to deal with this. So, but before the dead, Beth, Dr. Midnight 2, she is a whiz at computers. She knows everything about technology. So she helped you with the help of the goggles, download it, all the files off the gambler's laptop onto her own laptop before they could quietly sneak it back under Cindy's bed. Because if she knew they'd stolen it, she would know she was in trouble and then try to make a run for it. So Starman suggested they do that. And he said, you can't tell Cindy because, again, she'll make a run for it. I have to say, Starman, not a single drop of anger in sight. He had his head screwed on. He was finally the revered hero that we've been talking about for 3 seasons. And he was surprisingly the voice of reason. I really liked Starman in this episode. But again, it's all about Cindy, but a little bit about Courtney as well, because Cindy's not the only one lying. Courtney is obviously still training Cameron to use harness his ice powers. They had an incredible moment in Cameron's mansion garden, and where she told him to focus on his love instead of his anger, because his anger was making his ice powers unpredictable. So he focused on love, and he produced a beautiful giant ice sculpture, and they almost had a moment, and then he was like, the ice sculptures of my father, and it totally killed the moment because
No.
obviously Courtney knows what happened to his father. So she was like, yeah, his love channeled the ice statue of their biggest villain ever. But when they went inside, they found out that Courtney's stepdad and her mother, Pat and Barbara, figured out that she was seeing Cameron. So they decided to pay Cameron's grandparents a visit, the creepy grandparents who are villains, and they speak in different language. And they have ice powers too. And they know all about the JSA. Cameron doesn't yet. So the grandfather, he is the more logical of the two. He gave Pat and Barbara a meal or some dessert, and what the wife said to him in different language, did you poison it? And he was like, no. And she goes, well, then why did you give it to them? The grandmother is off the wall. But long story short, they wanted to talk about their kids seeing each other and just make sure everything was okay. But of course, Courtney was mortified by that, and she suggested they leave. But she did not tell Pat and Barbara that Cameron has ice powers. And of course, as they left the house, it was a big mistake because the grandmother is sitting watching them, looking all evil from the window. So that's obviously put them on their radar. But Courtney has not opened up to the JSA. She continues to see Cameron on the side and help him with his powers, and hasn't told the JSA any of this other than the fact that she's spending some time with him. So of course, that's created a lot of tension between Courtney and Yolanda, who are best friends. Rick, who's our man, he's off doing his own thing because last season the hourglass broke. And so, and just for a context read, in case you didn't know, our man, basically his power is that he puts on a magical hourglass and he's like super strength for an hour a day. So he has to choose when he puts the hourglass on. But the hourglass was broke last season in the fight against Eclipso, and it's been patchy and not working properly. Sometimes it gives him 22 minutes of strength, sometimes it gives him 49, sometimes it gives him 6 minutes. And after a conversation with Starman last week, he figured out the issue was the limiter. So, which is a terrible idea because he decided to solve that problem by removing the limiter altogether. Now, when he puts the hourglass on, he has super strength all day, every day, which I think, if we're going by the comics, Rick does end up having like an addiction problem to the hourglass. He doesn't know when to take it off. It powers him up too much. He can't go without it. I don't know if we're going there, but there is another secret. Rick has been very quiet this season, so there is another secret that he is now hiding. Meanwhile, Yolanda went to confession and said she apologized. She wanted to apologize and wanted forgiveness, and the priest said, you're forgiven for stealing, but you can't steal, you should never steal, even if you did it for the right reasons. And she was like, no, father, you misunderstand me. I'm not asking for forgiveness for what I've done. I'm asking forgiveness for what I'm about to do.
Ooh.
And of course, that was a beautiful foreshadowing of the episode, because Yolanda ends up leaving the laptop back under Cindy's bed, only to be caught by Cindy herself. And she was like, I knew you took it the first time you scratched the window on the way in. So Cindy knew the whole time. And then she was like, Yolanda, let's talk about this. I didn't kill the gambler. I took the laptop for my own reasons. But Yolanda did not want to talk. They had an incredible fight scene in Cindy's bedroom. They destroyed that room. The bed was scratched. Cindy lost some of her hair because of Yolanda's claws.
Michael, did someone die? Get to it.
No. Then anyway, at the end, literally Yolanda pushed Cindy at the window, and then the two of them ended up fighting on her lawn. And Rick then showed up to help support Yolanda, because he's got anger problems, and he totally supports Yolanda and totally believes Cindy was the one who killed the gambler. So the two of them end up double teaming Yolanda or Cindy. And in the fight, Cindy holds her own, I have to say, but in the fight, Cindy's cardigan gets torn, and they see the lizard arm underneath.
Oh.
And again, they continue to batter each other until they hear something in the sky. They look up.
Courtney.
And right, flying down in between them comes Courtney with a staff. She lands in between them in the triangle and sends them all flying. Because she's developed a new power this season, thanks to Starman's training her. She knows how to use the staff and connect with it more. So her eyes literally glow when she uses it. And so she dropped in and sent them all flying, split them up. And Cindy or Yolanda told them that Cindy had the laptop and that she'd been lying the whole time. But Courtney actually showed compassion to Cindy, like she does. And she asked, why couldn't you have just told us about this? Because Courtney figured out, now, wait a minute, it was never Dragon King. The skin cell we found at the crime scene was yours. It wasn't Dragon King. So she's been leading them on a wild goose chase the whole time. But Courtney had compassion, and she was like, if you had just been honest with us, we could have helped you. Cindy didn't like that. Cindy said, honest, like you've been honest with your team. And then she turned around and told Yolanda and Rick that Courtney has been training Cameron how to use his ice powers. And I believe, in the words of Cindy, she said she's been training that little psycho how to use his ice powers. And when he finds out what you did to his father, he's going to come for you. And I hope he wins. And then Cindy stormed off, teary-eyed, with a dramatic storm off. The JSA fallen apart because nobody trusts Courtney anymore. So she has agreed to step back and let Starman lead the JSA. And I have to say, credit to Brack Bassinger and Joel McHale, because the two of them had this beautiful scene in Courtney's bedroom where he finally was the mentor to her that he hasn't been all season. He said, look, you made mistakes. I made mistakes when I was younger. I trust your judgment, and the team will figure it out eventually. But in the meantime, he's going to lead them. But the big twist of the episode, remember how somebody's been watching everyone in Blue Valley the whole time? There's been cameras planted all over. The gambler discovered the feed on his laptop right before he was killed. Well, when Beth downloaded all of the gambler's stuff onto her laptop, she found the feed as well. The unidentified feed, as it's called. That's how she knew that Cindy and Yolanda and Rick were fighting on her lawn, because there are cameras all over Blue Valley and she could find out. So she was able to send Courtney there. But then she came to Courtney, she came to Pat, and she said she turned the fruit blender on in a really awkward scene. They were like, Beth, what's wrong with you? And she was like, everything's fine. And then turned the fruit blender on, so it was making noise in the background, and then whispered to them really quietly about how somebody's watching them. And they all kind of looked up into the corner because they knew the camera was up there. And all throughout the whole, the last couple of episodes, we've seen a glimpse of that person who's been watching them. But in this episode, they've been putting a wee jigsaw together just in their spare time. And on the final scene of the episode, we got to say the jigsaw was the shape of a skeleton or a skull. And I think, from my knowledge, from what I can call back, is it's suggesting that the person responsible for the murder is actually the assailant known as Mr. Bones, who was teased in the season 2 finale. We saw him. He is a person wearing a suit or a jacket, I can't really remember, with literally a skull for a face. And he said, "Oh, Blue Valley sounds like a lovely little place. I think I'll have to pay a visit there." Haven't heard head nor tail of him since, but it looks like Mr. Bones has arrived in Blue Valley.
Well, well, well.
My mouth is so dry after that monologue.
Wow, they really packed a lot into that one, huh?
They
They
did.
did. They really did. And there were some humorous moments. Like, remember, Mike and Jakeem are trying to get Cindy to join their team. Last week, they were like, "A woman like you needs to be appreciated." This week, they showed up to Cindy's house with flowers and chocolates that were like an offering for the good lady. And she went,
Cindy's like, "I'm busy."
the best moment of the episode, she was like, "Oh, no." And then shut the door in his business. But I think now, based on it, Cindy has no one now. She literally betrayed Courtney. That's what the episode's called, the betrayal. She told Courtney, or she told the JSA what Courtney was up to. The JSA no longer trust her. And Courtney was like that, like I said before, that paragon of integrity. Everybody's got their secrets, but Courtney doesn't. Everybody trusts Courtney. But she was keeping one secret, and Cindy revealed the whole truth to the JSA. So none of them trust her anymore. But that's left.
How old is Cindy supposed to be?
Teenager. 16,
okay.
17, I think.
Okay.
They all go to high school together. But of course, Mike has just recently got started going to the same high school. He's far younger. So it's going to look like Cindy has betrayed the last person she could betray. There is no one left for Cindy. So shockingly enough, I do think she is going to join up with the young ones, Mike and Jakeem, and their all-star squadron, because they're the only people she has left that we're rooting for her now. So yeah, this episode, not to be any more recappy, let's be a bit more reviewy. This episode definitely changed the game. As far as the screeners I've been sent, this as far as I've seen, I can see why now, because it's completely all the chess pieces that were in play. It's cleared the board. All the stories it was telling, it's pressed the reset button. I know for a fact there are 3 or 4 more stories this season is supposed to have told, and we haven't seen any of them yet. So I assume this is now where they're going to start coming in. We now have the first official tease of Mr. Bones. And even though Mr. Bones is the assailant watching them, he's not the big hulking creature that killed the gambler and assaulted Starman a few weeks ago. There is definitely someone else who is doing his bidding. We don't know who that is. I know there are some characters from the previous seasons are going to return in the episodes ahead. Again, that hasn't happened yet. But what have I written down here? The pacing was great. Like I said, the performances between Breck and Joel was just phenomenal, particularly in that scene. And I really just like the fact that everything we knew going into the season has just been wiped clean. I have no idea where the story is going to go next. And I think for a midway through the season, I feel like I've watched the whole season because I've seen every one of these 6 episodes about 4 times each. I'm excited about the idea of where it could go next.
How many episodes are left?
There are 7 left. So technically we've still most of the season left.
Yeah.
It's just I binged them. I shouldn't have, but for so long I binged those first 6 episodes weeks ago. So for so long, I feel like I've seen season 3. And now I don't know where season 3 will go after this. I'm very excited. It feels like it's entered uncharted territory. And like, it's all Cindy's fault, but I know Cindy didn't do it. She's just acting out because everybody wants her to act out. Everybody, it's like they've set such low expectations for her, so she can do nothing but live up to them. And you can't help but root for her. You want her to succeed, but like we said last week, she's making it so difficult, and she's just burnt the last bridge in court now.
Is the Cindy redemption arc coming in the back half of the season?
It has to. I think maybe working with Mike's exactly what's going to do that, because she kidnapped Mike last season. So I feel like there's another thing for her to make up for. If she ends up working with him and Jakeem, if she ends up working with 2 young people, maybe she could become an influence on them. I don't know. But things have never been more interesting, and I can't wait to see where the season goes, because that was definitely arguably the best episode of the season. Tense. And I was on the edge of my seat all 4 times I watched it.
Courtney will forgive Cindy. It'll happen.
It will.
If I had to make a prediction, Kim might not. At least not until season 4, because we're manifesting a season 4.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I can't wait to see how that arc plays out. That's been the most mysterious. We didn't know whether that would get explored, because Cameron's just been in the background for the whole series, and now we're finally doing it. We knew it was coming, but now we're finally doing it. I don't know how that's going to play into the murder mystery because it's so much its own thing, whereas everything else in the season's directly tied to it, whereas this is very much its own thing. I can't wait to see how it comes into play and if they can stop this poor kid who's been through so much tragedy in his life and yet has found something positive in Courtney, and it's going to be tainted when he finds out the truth. I don't know if they can stop him from becoming Icicle Jr. Is a dark turn destined to happen when the only source of light in his life is lying to him? We'll have to wait and see.
Well, it's heartbreaking. I mean, it's going to be hard. I'm more power to all the Cammy shippers out there. When
they've been through it, and I think they're going to keep going through it. But you see why I went through it with this episode. Look at my notes; it's so endless. I think I got through it all. Relax and breathe.
It sounded very tense, and you're right. Like the best episode that they've done so far this season. I love hearing your recaps and reviews, because they have you so engaged. I'm like, what happened next? As you retell it.
Nobody died yet, but I can't promise it will stay that way throughout the rest of the season.